Hello, everybody. Good morning. We'll be starting shortly, just a few minutes for a few last attendees. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'll just wait a few seconds for the rest of the attendee to join us. Okay, right. Well, welcome to the Group IB Fraud Day for the APAC region and the first Q1 2022. I am Julian. I am the product manager for the fraud hunting platform here at Group IB. And today I will be your host for this webinar. I will be joined by my colleague Pavel Shepetina, our pre-sale manager.
Nice to meet you, everyone.
And Maxim Baldakov, our lead fraud analyst.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining.
So today we will discuss the fraud landscape in APAC, particular focus on some fraud cases that we have seen against the financial industry, the online gambling, and we will discuss some of the particularly effective scam currently in the region. And then we'll discuss how we can mitigate those and how it can be done from a cost-effective point of view. So just a forward about Group IB. We are a cybersecurity firm. We've been in the business for over 17 years. Initially born from investigation. Really the core of Group IB is our investigation in cybercrime. We have partnered with Interpol and Europol. And based on this expertise, we created a set of solutions for the industry. We are located in Singapore is our head office. We have office in Dubai, Amsterdam, and Moscow. So with this, I think we can dive in. So here, Pasha, I think you get some data from us on the region and the amount of data we can see.
Yeah, of course. So Group IB is a well-known threat intelligence provider. As you probably know, we have our own solution, which is called Threat Intelligence Attribution. And we do collect a lot of compromised data from closed sources like CNCs, bot-net traffic, and different phishing pages, phishing kits, and so on. And we can highlight this data in case of different countries, in case of different regions. So here you can see statistics for APAC region in case of different countries and their compromised data, accounts, and cards. So you see it's like really a lot of compromised data right now in Japan for the last year, because there were many different attacks with a lot of information leakage. This compromised data is not publicly available, just keep in mind. So it's our own closed source. But we definitely see that it's happening everywhere in the region. There is no low rate for a specific country, yeah, especially if you compare it with the population.
And what jumps to me here, Pasha, is Australia. The number is fairly low, and I would expect. Why is that such a difference, for example, between Australia, India, and Japan, in your view?
Yes, that's true. Australia has not like the highest number, obviously, in the region, but the opportunity for a fraudster might be quite more attractive per account. For example, if you compare it between one account Australian client, like a bank client, and China client, for example.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, and so the next set of data is compromised account. What can you tell us about this? What does it show?
Yeah, let's talk about specific numbers. We do have here comparison for a world itself and for APAC region for the last 3 years. Basically, the most interesting part for us is how numbers actually increased for the last year. It's more than 5 times worldwide. It is about 5 times also for APAC. And obviously it's well reason why, yeah, because we all started to work from home because of different restrictions in many different countries, because of different curfews and so on. some people actually lost their job, and that's why they're supposed to change and become typical fraudsters, because it's actually sometimes it's really easy to do, especially if you have some kind of soft skills, I would say. So numbers really increased for last year, and even if you compare it with this year, but it's like only about 1.5 months, it's already about 10 million for the world and about 2 million for APAC region. So
Yes.
numbers are already huge. And keep in mind, like we're still talking about not the public leakage data. Yeah, it's compromised accounts, pure leak it in closed sources.
Okay, so Max, when we see those figures, in your opinion, the trend is going to keep going. What are we going to overtake 2021 numbers, you think, despite the COVID restrictions starting to scale back?
Well, as Pavel already said, since many people and businesses shifted their activity online, remote work became already part of our lives, and it's not going away anywhere. And because of that, I believe we definitely see a continuous growth over the period, over the next, several months for the near future.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Pasha, we see this compromised data. So maybe you can give us a rundown on what you see the key tools that the fraudsters are using, and the one we should be looking for, really.
Yeah, first of all, the most obvious question here, like what is the target? The target is any application in the web or on the mobile platforms. About the goals, obviously it's always money, but for different kind of fraudsters, it can be, for example, just credentials, and they steal credentials and then sell it on a dark web forum. And dark forum actually is one of the most valuable instruments here, I would say, because there you can buy and sell compromised data like user credentials, their personal information. You can sell and buy different type of accesses, for example, for already infected devices, and you can also buy different malware, different phishing kits, and so on. In case of channels, yeah, obviously it's very classic. So all channels can be used, of course, emails, SMS, calls, and so on.
Okay, and in terms of the instrument, do you think which one are we seeing rising the most? Would you say malware is the one that is the most on the rise, or?
Yeah, especially for sophisticated fraudsters, it's kind of easy to do because you create malware, and it can be automatically spread, like infect one device, and the malware automatically sends a message to all the contacts from the list for this device. So it's something easy to do, and you have ability to infect a lot of devices. And when you get access to Android device, you basically have everything: OTP codes, personal data, access to probably many different banking applications of other e-commerce companies, and so on. You can even make calls.
Well, I think Max, you've got some figures for us on what we've seen in the region. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely, Julian. So we looked at the activity in the region over the period of previous several months, and find out that actually a portion of the high-risk activity of the high-risk sessions on the channel that we protect is relatively small and below than 8%. However, those 8% are composed of very advanced and very diverse types of threats that we'll be looking into. However, actually, if you look at the statistics of the portion of the user who experienced, potential account takeover activity or high-risk activity on the next slide, you will see that almost quarter of all the users over the period of last several months experienced some kinds of potential account takeover event, right? It could be a new device, it could be, I don't know, new device coming from a suspicious subnet with a bad reputation or something like this. And almost 20% of users experienced or presented signs of the high-risk behavior that we'll be looking into in details.
So this is interesting. So there is a lot of focus on account takeover and a lot of solution out there. and I think we dive a bit more into that in the future. But when I'm looking at this graphic, you clearly distinguish account takeover in yellow here and the other in red. Is it because you see account takeover as potentially easier to counteract, to countermeasure compared to the other type of threat that you highlighted here?
I would say that account takeover has always been a core objective for the fraudsters. And if you actually look in the next slide, the fraudsters who are trying to perform those account takeover activities, utilizing more and more diverse type of instruments, they try different approaches, and they're advancing at a very high pace in that sense. And the amount of creativity that the fraudsters have is quite impressive. They use things such as mobile remote access tools, to gain an access to the physical device. They use active calls, using social engineering and so on.
And you have a few other examples here, something that I'm not familiar myself with, like the subnet scoring base. Can you tell me a bit more about that, the detection based on historical analysis? What does it relate to?
So in order to effectively combat those account takeover activity in the region or worldwide, you would need to be quite diverse in terms of different detection and defense mechanisms that your channel, that your online banking or your online portal should have. And one approach would be to utilize historical analysis of the previous data that you have. So for example, let's say you detected some malicious or some fraudulent activity related to the particular IP subnet, right? And you're definitely gonna need to keep that information in the future, so that next time somebody else would come into your portal or to your banking portal, you will know that that particular subnet has a bad reputation, and you've seen some malicious activity there before.
Okay, and so I see here we mentioned the remote access Trojan, and that leads quite nicely to the next threat that we've seen, and here it was remote access. So Pavel, can you tell us a bit more about remote access, please?
Yeah, remote access is still popular and really available for fraudsters tool because it's legal. You can just download it from the internet. Many providers of remote access tools are actually providing these solutions for free, like TeamViewer, for example, AMI-admin, and so on. And they're available for any platform, I would say. So it is available for a PC. You can install it also on Android. For iOS, it's a bit more complicated. You cannot provide remote access, but you can share your screen using TeamViewer support. So it is also a good potential in case of, for example, fraud like push payment to make user actually to have a transaction right now. But when you provide the remote access to the PC or Android, it can be in use case, and you can basically steal anything. You can say, for example, hey, I'm a bank representative, and probably your device is infective. And to check something on your device, to fix it, I need remote access. So can you please install TeamViewer right now and provide me access? Because it's like urgent. Probably somebody is trying to steal your money or something. And in this case, the fixed team provides the access. Fraudster will try to make some changes. I don't know, like check Android settings, check applications, and they say, okay, now I need to log in bank application. You will get a OTP code now. I'm gonna see it obviously because I have remote access. And in this case, we may have a few different scenarios. If they already have compromised accounts, obviously they can log in at the same time from their own devices, get this OTP and steal money from a new device, from the fraudster device, or they can get inside the user's environment on the user's device and there already make some kind of test transaction.
And this is relatively low tech, really, as a kind of attack, right? Because, like you mentioned, TeamViewer is free. You can really use it quite easily. There's no skills involved, rather than the bravado of running the scam. I read an article, I think it was a couple of years ago now, when there was an entire call center somewhere in APAC where the people working there generally believed that they worked for a bank, quite a large global bank, but in fact they were working for fraudster. Fraudster created a fake call center with a script. It looked like the people generally believed they were helping, so they were very convincing on the phone. So yeah, that's
really surprising. It's really surprising. Sometimes they even have their own KPIs for employees, like you make 100 calls and you can get like 10% of success, like 10% of users will probably transfer your money and you can get percentage of this money. So yeah, it's really surprising what kind of system and how the process is actually established on their side.
It is a business. They are running it as a business with objective, like you mentioned, and quite surprisingly, what we see often when we support our client, when we work with Interpol and so on, we realize that actually if the company that get attacked tend to fight back and work with the authorities, they will adapt their strategy to avoid complicated scenarios that could damage their enterprise. So it's I think it's very healthy to look at them as a company and to understand that they have a risk approach as well. Right, so Pasha, we see that figuratively. Can you explain to us what are the elements that the audience should look for in the real world in terms of spotting those fraud?
Yeah, obviously it depends on the specific platform. So we talk here about PC, we talk about Android, about iOS, and techniques that can be used for detection obviously are different. Here, for example, we can see some examples for Android. And on Android, it's possible to analyze each installed application on the device. And you can see, like, we highlight the mobile red here in alerts. But also on Android, it is possible to understand there is active remote access happening right now, exactly at this moment, from your application, as a bank application, as an e-commerce application, anything. And the same is possible to make for others. So we can understand there is user is sharing his screen of the device to somebody else. For web, I would say you have more instruments, more tools for detection, because first of all, you can analyze the mouse movements, mouse actions, and try and understand that something is really different from the typical user behavior. So we use some kind of machine learning algorithms to understand the user behavioral fingerprint. And you can also scan actually on the website of user PC. And for example, if you see there is port active for TeamViewer, you can highlight it in your detection logic.
Okay, so there are elements there that we should see. There are traces that the audience can easily catch, right? Okay, thank you for that. Max, next top threat for the region was malware. What can you tell us about this? I know that there's different type of malware. They come in different forms, different modus operandi. I think CoopIB is just about to release a bulletin on a new one called Medusa, which is going around. But are they common ground? Are they things that we can already put in place that will catch most of those, even without being specific to one?
So yeah, malware became really an essential part of fraudulent activity, and it's advancing at a really high pace. So in order to successfully detect and combat, those new types of malwares that are developed, specifically for the fraudster needs, you would need to be creative, right? And standard approach of classic approach of just scanning and analyzing installed applications on the end user device, by the hash sum using, different vendors might not be sufficient anymore. And I would say that the best way is to utilize two different approaches. One is where you would have, your classic malware detection based on the hash sum analysis. The second approach would be based on the behavior of what kind of activity you see during the time when your application is open and running. So basically, I'm talking about when you see a suspicious overlay activity, a common tactic, popular among many bunker malwares. Accessibility services enabled on the Android, active screen sharing or remote access, as Pavel already said. You would definitely need to watch out for those signs as well.
And so what we often hear when we talk to customers that have not yet experienced a major break, a major threat, we have, well, for now we don't have an issue. We wait until we see that something is threatening. How long people have really, if you hear there's a new threat which is specifically successful with the environment that you have, can run an exploit that is known now on some of the system you have, how long do you normally have to react in your view?
So I would say we're talking days, we're talking, weeks. This is a speed where, new kinds of malwares spread, really fast, not just within a particular country, not just within a particular community, but within the whole region. So if we actually looked at the data over the period of last months and analyzed new types of malwares that we have detected in the APAC region, and the amount of, the speed, the pace of the malware spread is quite significant. And you can look at the animation, how fast it spreads, within 3 or 4 weeks. So,
so this
by
was
the time you add, yeah, go ahead, Julian.
Sorry, this was just in 3 weeks' time?
Yes, 3 or 4 weeks.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, so relatively very little time for you to then adapt your systems and try to put things in place, right? So
absolutely. So by the time you add different indicator of compromise, it might be already too late. So that's why you would also need to implement the behavior-based detection.
Thank you. So next we had the top culprit also with multi-accounting is still quite high, and it's particularly relevant in gambling industry when multiple accounts are used. What can you tell us about multi-accounting and what we should do to help?
So multi-accounting is a classic fraudster behavior. Whether it's online banking, gambling industry, e-com sector, or any other online-based channel, and usually multi-accounting result from malicious activity such as money laundering, account takeover, mass account takeover campaigns, or mass fake registration, mass fake account registration. So in this sense, fraudsters actually are quite advanced, and they are taking different precautions measures so that they would avoid different detection mechanisms, and they would sometimes try to spoof device IDs, try to show that they have try to change some technical environment on their device so that it would appear as they are having many different devices. However, at the graph that we're looking at, we see 3 iOS devices all united by one device fingerprint. So I would say in order to successfully combat multi-accounting, you would definitely need to put a lot of R&D times into developing a stable and reliable device fingerprinting algorithm.
Okay, so here we can see that someone has tried to clean the device to make it look like a completely different device. But because if you have very good and sophisticated device fingerprinting, despite the fact that the device was wiped, you can still see that it's the same device that is now back and trying to act like it's a new one.
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, it could clearly putting a lot of effort there in trying to hide their track. And next was the hosting detection capability. Tell us more about this. I'm not very familiar with this, but this looked like an impressive network. What is this?
So we're looking at the network activity coming from the hosting provider, and using hosting provider as a base for fraudulent or scam campaigns are common amongst more advanced fraudsters, right? Who take several precautionary steps to again to avoid being detected, to avoid being caught doing some illegal activity, some malicious activity. And hosting providers became one of their best friends in that sense, in performing scam campaigns, in performing fraudulent campaigns, and so on. And because of that, it is essential, in order to successfully protect your online banking or your other online channel, you would definitely need some kind of algorithm, some kind of detection mechanisms that would be able to successfully detect connections coming from the hosting providers. And those detection mechanisms, it is not sufficient just to utilize open source databases of the hosting providers worldwide. You would also need to implement feeds coming from the cyber threat intelligence solutions. You would also need to perform advanced audits of the subnet, look at the distribution of open ports, and look at many different technical parameters of the subnet where you see a particular connection, so that you would successfully be able to detect those kind of suspicious activities.
You can clearly see, I love this visual graphic. It's really great to show the level of sophistication that you are facing here. Clearly, if you see such a level of layering in an attack against your organization, you know that someone is taking seriously his attempt to get through. Thank you, that's very impressive. So in terms of this activity, I think you get some numbers for us here to give us a sense of the scale. What are we looking at?
So we're looking at the average session score, average amount of risk that the particular connection possess, and we compared sessions that were generated from the hosting providers to general session score among the whole region, and we find out that actually sessions that were generated from the hosting providers possess way greater level of risk activities when compared with the regions. We see a lot of suspicious behavior, we see account takeover activity, we see. Yep.
Max, we lost you for a second. The internet went off. Yes, Max, we lost you for a moment. Could you go back? We lost you.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So basically, we're looking at the average session score that were generated coming from the hosting providers, and that were generated in general for the whole region. And basically, what that means is average session score, average amount of risk that a particular session possess that was generated from the hosting provider is way greater comparing to sessions that were generated within the whole region. And because of that, what it actually means is the amount of risk that the hosting session possess is way greater than the sessions that were generated in general.
And how does because now that people are working from home and there is this people are really sensitive about their privacy, so you hear a lot of people using a VPN even when they're connecting from home, even if they use remote banking or whatever, because they think it helps with their privacy. How is that connected to the hosting? Is that related?
Sure, yeah. So you would definitely be able to differentiate between legitimate VPN providers and hosting providers. Again, based on the port distribution, based on data that is available online, based on the feeds coming from the cyber threat intelligence, and so on. So again, right, the detection mechanisms has to be not just sufficient, in order for it to be sufficient, it has to be very advanced and also very precise, so that you wouldn't cut users who are utilizing VPNs and other means of privacy protection.
Yeah, so again, it's a question of behavior and a combination with strong intelligence about the market to make sure you don't generate false positive when someone is just generally using a genuine provider for privacy reason, right? So yeah, it's a good example of when you cannot just use basic review, otherwise you're going to jeopardize the user experience.
Yes, Julian, you're correct.
Thank you. Right, so next issue that we had in the region for APAC was automation. This is an example that I know because I've worked with a company about this issue. So here we're looking at an example of bot being used for automation in betting arbitrage in the gambling industry. And this is when, depending on an event, for example, you might have betting company that have different odds, they predict different output. And so the fraudster can then use the difference of prevision of result of a sporting event, for example, meaning that they manage to spread the bet, and no matter what the outcome is, they still be able to win. And this is when having, again, layer of protection on your infrastructure, on your web, like a preventive proxy that will stop automated bets, automated data analysis will protect your site against that. And I think we've seen quite a bit of automation in the region. So next was reverse engineering. So Max, what can you tell us about this? Can you explain to someone like me what reverse engineering means?
So basically, reverse engineering is a technique that we see that we see fraudsters utilize, starting to utilize quite recently, and it's a really advanced tactics of the fraudulent activity when they try to basically find out what are the internal mechanisms of the application, of the mobile application or web-based application, so that they would later on be able to abuse it. And by abusing it, they can get an access to the sensitive data. They can try to brute force, credentials. They can try to brute force different APIs. So one example would be, let's say you have an application, you have a mobile application where you can order, different kinds of goods like Amazon app. And what fraudsters usually do, they reverse engineer the application. They would see what are the internal API calls within that application, that are required to check whether or not a particular promo code is valid or not. And later on, what they would do, once they know the internal mechanisms of the validation of the promo code, they would start to abusing it. They would, try to brute force different promo codes, and by doing that, they can actually, deal a lot of financial damage to the organization, whether it's e-com based, whether it's online banking, and so on. And because of this, modern solutions that provide protection against fraud, that provide fraud prevention, should definitely be able to detect, that kind of reverse engineering activities. So something like when you see that a device is connected to the debugger, or you see, some kind of technical environment used, like an Xcode or some other tools that are widely used by the developers for testing, for the debugging, and so on. And of course, you would definitely need to keep an eye at the integrity of the mobile application, making sure that the source code of your mobile application does not change, within the particular version.
Yes. So I think, Pavel, you will show us a bit more about this, how this is working, right?
Yeah, of course, not only. So can you turn on the video again? I remember it's quite a long way, because we're going to infect the device. We already have installed our demo applications on this device. And right now I'm infecting the device with a FluBot. Last version of FluBot, as I remember, it's 1.5. It was presented in December. Yeah. So fraudsters started to use it and to infect a lot of Android devices globally. I won't say it's like specific for the region, because it's quite popular just everywhere. So we're infected the device. There is a new application called the voicemail. Voicemail sounds like a nice feature in our century, so why not? Let's install it. Let's also provide accessibility services to the voicemail, because it's probably it's needed, and the application is asking for this permission. So why not? Why not? Of course, this application was developed by professionals. So professionals, yeah, I will say, from the development perspective. And sometimes it's a bit lagging with the permissions, with the different questions, with the locking of the screen and the loading of the device itself. Yeah, as you see it right now in the video. So we provided the accessibility services. Also, it's asking to be to set this application basically as a default SMS application. So why not? This is voicemail. So obviously this application needs access to all SMSs on my phone. Why not set as default? For some reason, it's asking us about this a few times, maybe even a few hundred times, but you see now the current default application is voicemail. So we can jump right now to our demo application. You can imagine it's like your application. And yeah, log in. I'm gonna try to type it in our test environment and maybe make a few transactions inside applications, see how it's going and so on. So we're signing in, then we use highly secret password. We can choose one of the banks and transfer the money, $600 to the specific user. Why not? So yeah, device is infected, and we can also get a lot of triggers from this device. You remember it is a virtual machine. Yeah, obviously it's not a real physical device. And let's actually see how it looks like from the detection perspective. So right now we are showing you our platform where it actually can be highlighted. So this is our session with the APAC fraud day login username. And here are a lot of details. First of all, you can see Android emulator usage detected. So we definitely know that there is emulator. The rooted device was rooted, yeah. No screen lock, so I don't use any fingerprint or pins. Also, user can install unknown sources download. Basically third-party applications, and we detected the malicious application on the device that it is installed, and the nice trigger which can actually highlight you about suspicious activity, new default SMS application, as well as accessibility services. So some application abused accessibility services, and this is actually the most popular technique right now to get the full access to this device, because you can read messages, you have the ability of other applications, you can do basically anything, open application, close it, and so on. Maybe some other triggers that can be highlighted, for example, Google protection is off, or for example, it is also possible to detect overlay activity for Android devices.
So you can also detect if there are expected application installed on a phone. Like for example, if you realize there's no social media application or others like that, it's more likely that the phone is either an infection.
Yeah, exactly. Developer mode and the use of debugger as well, as Max already mentioned. Everything here is possible to analyze.
I think it was end of last year when we worked with Europol to arrest a gang called the Fraud Family. When they were basically providing, there was people that set up a business of providing malware of search and sell it to fraudsters. So they did not commit the fraud themselves, but they act as a complete supplier with support services as well. And so the malware, it's an industry. It really is an industry of people making a living out of creating those while distancing themselves from the actual fraud. So that's pretty scary in some cases. So when we now gone full cycle, we looked at the data. So Max, can you reiterate again what it means in terms of numbers? Because obviously, you know, at times we think, well, it's only a small portion of all the sessions that are fraudulent, but what does it really mean for the audience?
Julian, yes, you're absolutely correct. So it's only a small portion of the high-risk activities that we detected, you know, when compared to the whole traffic. However, you know, the portion of those high-risk activity or potential account takeover activity is composed of very advanced and very diverse threats. And as you already said, you know, fraudsters do not operate on their own. They work with each other. You know, they provide different services. They provide malware development. They provide, you know, Some fraudsters are specializes in remote access tools. Some fraudsters might provide tools to create phishing links and so on. And basically, the new emerging threats and different approaches that the fraudsters are utilizing is quite advanced. And we see, a whole range of it, starting from things such as, very classic social engineering attacks based on scam calls, and ending with things like reverse engineering or really advanced malware that is, sometimes you can even download from the official, provider such as Google Play Store and so on.
Yeah, we've seen example of when an app that was initially legitimate, for example, a game, can then be taken over by fraudster when they bought it from the initial developers and managed to make some changes that didn't get noticed until it was too late, and then later on taking off the stores of the providers of that. So it's not always a 100% guarantee that an app from a store is 100% safe. I think thank you for that, Max. So I think for the audience, we discussed a few things. We discussed that there are techniques here to help you fight this kind of game. And I think it's important to realize that for you to review and to move on to better technology doesn't necessarily have to be an expensive process. So when mentioning the ROI, we have commissioned Forrester last year to do a review of a change of platform from someone that had a legacy platform that was some years ago considered a leader, but didn't quite evolve with the industry. And when we commissioned that, it was quite a large bank in Turkey. They had 6 million customers, 10 million transactions a month. And after just a few months of implementing these new techniques we discussed today during the call, we realized that we could make significant changes. So Forrester did this independent study, and they saw that we reduced the false positive by 20%, while catching 10 to 20% more fraud, but also improved the customer experience because of a better analysis and behavior techniques. We've been able to reduce the OTP need by 30%, reducing costs for the bank. And meanwhile, we save cost by over 30% on licensing. So overall, the change of the solution was 130% positive ROI in 6 months. And it's not necessarily as hard as you may think. The technology has evolved. We have seen customers being able to test new solution in only a month time, all in, and being able to test. So I invite the audience to use the QR code on the screen that will take you to this independent study, and you can read a bit more about how to reduce your cost, your exposure to fraud, without necessarily having to face a very expensive project or difficult project. So that concludes now what we will do. If it's okay for the audience, you can now give us some question. You can use the chat on the platform to give us some question. And while we get ready for this, we have a few polling questions that I would like to ask the audience. And so we'll start that. And while we are doing the polling, please feel free to send us some question that you may have on the platform. Oh, there's already a question actually while we get ready for the polling. How do you detect account takeover for mobile app? For example, Forrester already have user credential and they're logging using mobile app from fraudster device. How detect this activity? Does the behavior detection will create a new behavior? Yeah,
I think I can try answering that, Julian. So yeah, account takeover, as already said, is a classic objective of any fraudsters, and to successfully combat that activity, there are different techniques and different approaches to detect account takeover, and it can range from really simple and easy to implement rules. So for example, you see a connection from the previously unknown for the particular user IP subnet, or you can go ahead and implement some really advanced algorithms of the biometric fingerprint. So actually, what we've done here is in our solution, we put a lot of R&D time and resources into developing a really stable and reliable biometric fingerprint of the user, based on how he uses his phone, based on how he performs different touches, how he holds, what's the orientation of the device, and so on. And putting those factors, those different parameters into a machine learning algorithm, we were able to actually achieve a really high level of precision when somebody is using different phones or using the same physical device, but just two different physical persons. So there are different techniques that range from really simple ones and ending with really advanced and sophisticated. But I would say in order to successfully combat account takeover activity, you would need to implement the whole range and analyze every single session that triggered a potential account takeover event.
Yes, there's an example that we use often when we do a live demo with our client on the platform, and I always like that is if you see someone holding the phone on the left hand, and let's say, for example, if it's a person with a small hand, we can almost guess the size of the phone because we can see the angles of swapped on the phone and so on. So when we create the behavior for that user, the fact that there is a new device or someone tried to log on, we still know what the way this user is using his phone looks like. So when someone tried to impersonate them and they use the phone, to give a very simple example, your client is normally left-handed. So when they use their phone, it's the left thumb that is swapping. So on the screen, you will see the swap will go towards the left. If someone is right-handed, then he will go completely on the other side. And it's a very simple, very easy example to see how the behavior of the user will not match. So even past the fact that it's a new device. We have another question. Thank you for the presentation. If a WhatsApp account takeover considered an account takeover, or account takeover only means all phone takeover? Right, well, in this case, we are looking at account takeover is specifically to an application. It's when you have managed to get the credential of for example, the banking application, or for example, an e-commerce, and you have managed to store these. I think for a WhatsApp account takeover, for example, you have the credential of the phone and manage somehow to also intercept the SMS, but it's not the whole phone. Then it's more of a physical stealing the phone, which is slightly different. You steal the device. All right. I don't see any other question right now. Oh, see, there's another. Okay, so should we start with the polling? I think let's have a few polling questions for the audience. What is your biggest business and security challenge? So we'll let the audience a few moments to answer.
And Julian, if while the audience is answering the question, I would like to say that ease of use for the end consumer is a really important parameter that lead to the higher conversion. So, and it's great that you mentioned the total economic impact study, because in that particular research, what the Forrester have found out is that different fraud prevention solutions are also able not only to detect potentially malicious or fraudulent activities, but also basically assign a trust score, right? So that is also a really important part of fraud prevention solution, being able to not only do the basic detection of malicious activity, but also assign trust score for every particular device or user.
Yeah, exactly. And the rate of false positives is also extremely important, because when you have thousands or maybe like 50% of false positive, does it make sense, right?
Ah, well, and we have interesting result here. So, okay, so sophisticated fraud is clearly high on the agenda, which is great news. And I think it's important to say that one does not have to stop the others, right? So it is possible to detect sophisticated fraud without impacting the user experience. That's definitely something that you don't have to think that you have to compromise and accept a certain level of fraud in order to protect the business. We hear that sometimes in e-commerce, where customers are worried that if they implement overly sophisticated fraud prevention, it might present more obstacle to the consumption. And that is simply not true. If the solution is properly designed, your user experience will remain untouched. It's just a question of having the right solution in place. These are interesting figures. Otherwise, it's fairly well balanced between the other. False positive is a high one. Yes, of course, it kind of linked to the two. Again, if you have the right solution in place, you should be able to detect sophisticated fraud without creating a huge amount of false positive. And I think here in the industry, sometimes there's some confusion about measuring that really matters. We see sometimes discussion of measuring 5,000 attributes on your site. It's not always relevant. What you have to do really, and Max, you can maybe say a bit more about this, but is to focus on measuring the key trigger, the right trigger, so that you don't create noise and false positive. Is that a fair comment, Max?
Yes, it is quite common, and it's one of the core, I would say, characteristics that the modern, fraud prevention solution should have and must have, in order to be effective and precise. And so one way to improve, a situation with false positives is to, constantly feed the data, to that solution. So in other words, solution has to be intelligent, has to be smart in that sense, and also utilize the feed coming from the client, from the online banking, from the mobile application, that would basically tell whether or not that particular session has been marked as fraud, or this particular account has been marked as legitimate, and so on. So it is also it should be a core parameter of modern fraud prevention solution. Being able to utilize customers' data. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, that's something that we see missing often is the feedback loop in order to get the result back from it. So we have multiple partners we work with from risk management platform, which are very efficient at that, providing a feedback loop so that the identity protection and the session protection solution can then adapt the result of the rules according to the end result. That's interesting. Right, could we now maybe move to the next pool? I'm keeping an eye on the question. Audience should feel free to ask us any question if you have. So next pool, which fraud case did you face before? Oh, that's an interesting one. I'm interested to see what the audience has to say about that. While we wait for the answer, what are your bets? Max, what do you think will be the top score there within the audience?
I would say the social engineering case would be the most common one, since it's it's a low cost approach. This does not require any level of technical expertise when compared to malware attacks or remote access exploitation or bot activity. So yeah, and the conversion of the successful social engineering attacks is still quite high, so that it would remain relevant not just in a particular region, but globally.
Yes, and I can see that because we see the industry has been trying to do a lot of effort for kind of education around social engineering, but it is a difficult approach to rely on client being wiser to this. Okay, so social engineering, yeah. So Max there, foreseen, great foreseen. It's interesting to see that bot attack it's so low, because I think people underestimate the amount of bots activity on the internet. What is the percentage of bot activity on the internet? There is some statistic on this. Do you know, Max? Like I think it's a huge amount of the total internet activity, isn't it?
Well, see, Julian, it depends on what kind of detection mechanisms the clients have. Sometimes we face with a situation when some of our customers at the beginning of the POC, they are confident that there is no bot activity on their mobile application, or no bot activity on the web channel, and they are confident in their current security provider. In that sense, so they really believe that there is no bot attacks coming to their website. However, the techniques that fraudsters are utilizing when it comes to bot activity, again, becomes really quite advanced, and we see different scam groups, different fraudsters that specialize in writing a particular kind of bot software that is unable to detect based on the signature, right? That is, so you are not able to detect, based on some parameter in the technical environment of the end user device or a particular browser. So in that sense, in order to successfully combat bot activity, again, you would need to implement two different approaches. One would be signature based, the second one would be behavioral based. So for example, when you see that there are users who are clicking, at the same coordinate in the browser for quite some time, or there are some, particular loops that the users are taking, within a period of, several hours, up to, 10, 15, 20 hours, then you can definitely, tell that it is potentially a bot-generated activity. So people, usually underestimate that threat because they are sometimes simply unable to see it.
Yeah, there's some very advanced solution out there, and some very easy to acquire, like a Selenium. Puppeteers are actually surprisingly low skill to deploy on some website in order to perform some activities. I think it's always something that people will be surprised on how easy it is. All right.
You can even buy bots, any kind of botnet, and use this botnet actually to attack the specific website, and it's like highly available on the dark web forums.
Yeah, everything can be made for measure almost now. It's a tailor-made bot activity. All right, well, maybe we can move to the next pool. That's always an interesting question. Are you confident that your current system is adequate? So that the poll is completely anonymous. Nobody will be able to see who answered what. Yeah, I will be surprised. I'm looking forward to see that, because we often see after those sessions, when we explain certain type of activity, that some of the audience realize that, I've never seen that in my platform, and not been able to detect certain things. And he has to question whether or not it is just because you are so lucky that it doesn't happen in your environment, or perhaps, as Max was saying before, it's just that you haven't have the technology to detect it. And so it will be interesting to see the result.
I'm actually curious I would like to ask Pavel. Oh, he already answered. Never mind then.
Unsure. Here we go. Yeah, that's fairly common. And so this is quite telling. So we have here quite a very slow proportion.
But I'm actually curious to hear Pavel's opinion on that matter. Right at the beginning of the POC, since you're the lead project manager, who is responsible for a successful result of the POC. Pavel, what is your opinion? Like, how do your customers feel when you approach them about their particular solution? What do you think?
It is always very surprising for customers, because we highlight a lot of triggers, a lot of new detections, a lot of new fraud they never seen before. And when you see on the statistics that we present, different techniques, different use cases, probably some customers, some people even surprised with the specific techniques, surprised with specific technologies that can be used for detection as well. Because it is possible to use not only like transactional fraud, but also device intelligence, also IP intelligence, also behavioral metrics, and everything can be in one specific solution for all platforms, for all channels.
Yeah, so
Pavel, this is a great insight.
Recently, we did.
Sorry.
We did a POC recently for a betting company in Americas, but just before the Super Bowl, we convinced them to do a POC, and they were feeling very confident that the solution was adequate. And after the Super Bowl, when we showed them the differences on what we have found and compared to the current provider, it was quite frightening for them. And this goes back to what we said earlier. For you to test a different solution is not necessarily a complicated thing. Mostly if you're looking at the web application, it is very easy because all we need is the data to be copied towards us. It doesn't impact your production environment. It doesn't impact the user ability, but we are able to show you then within a few weeks all the cases that we will have spotted, and then it's easy to make a comparison. And the cost on time and the resources on the client side is fairly low. I think sometimes our clients are worried that changing is expensive, that it's required a lot of resources, and but that's not always true. I think Pavel, you can testify of that.
Yeah, also surprisingly, in many cases, there is just no solution actually for fraud detection. The specific website, the specific applications, the specific company, they just have a authentication system, and they say we use a second factor by default, OTPs and so on. So we are confident in our fraud landscape. And but it's right now it's actually easy to abuse the OTP. Yeah, you saw a lot of examples. You can use malware, you can use rat tools, and so on. And many companies, they're just confident there is a fraud level in their business is quite low, but it's actually not true. And you're supposed to use these solutions, especially in our time.
Yeah. Well, this concludes our webinar. I want to thank the audience for joining us today, and I hope that this was informative for you. If you, oh no, sorry, we have one more poll. Apologies. Yes, so for our next webinar, we will be interested in knowing if there is any of those topics you're particularly interested in hearing about. We will have another webinar with you in the next quarter, and this is something that we are going to do quarterly in order to keep informing you of the development in the region. So we'll just do this last poll just to get a sense of what you would like to see next year. And then we will say our goodbyes and wait for you to reach out to us if you need any further information. Right, so the last poll. Okay, yeah, fairly predictable phishing hosting. Perfect, right. Guys, is that something you expected to see? Is that where you had your bets on? Phishing hosting?
I was sure Nikolai would win.
Pavel,
Phishing is still popular. Phishing is still popular for centuries, I think. Yeah, like 20 years ago, phishing was popular. Phishing is popular now. It can be also used to get OTP in live and steal money from the user account in live. And it's something that we really didn't cover this webinar, so we're gonna cover it next.
Perfect. Yeah, and call ID technology is up and coming, so well, we will do that. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. We're slightly over time. I appreciate that you stayed with us. If you need any further information, feel free to contact us. We will send you some a summary of the webinar with the follow-up emails, and we will be a recording on the website soon for you to join. I want to thank you again. I thank my colleagues for joining. Thank you, Pavel.
Thank you, Julian, and goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Pavel. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.